If you knew you were enough, what would your life look like? What would love look like? This is the Enough Factor broadcast, where we're redefining what makes you enough in life and in love. Now here's your host, Suzette Virna. Do you want to find your calling in life but don't know where to begin? Or you don't believe you can actually do the thing you're called to do, so you don't? You're not alone. I've been there and I know how hard it can be to silence the doubt. I also know how hard it is to trust in something you've never done before. It's scary, it's uncomfortable, and it takes a certain level of commitment. That's why I'm so excited to tell you about my personal coach and mentor, Patrice Washington's free 5-day Committed to the Call challenge. I know from firsthand experience that over the course of these 5 days, Patrice will take you by the virtual hand and lovingly guide you through how to not only uncover your purpose, but also put key elements in place so you can pull in profits, doing what you love, and use your purpose to help others prosper. This is my 3rd time attending, and every time I come out more empowered and committed to play full out and do what I'm called to do, and have some fun while doing it. It kicks off Monday, August 9th, and I hope to see you there. To register, head over to SuzetteSolutions.com and click on Committed to the Call 5-Day Challenge. I've got a special link just for you. Now, I've had the pleasure of featuring some phenomenal men and women on the podcast over these 3 seasons. But I don't believe it's a coincidence that over the next 3 weeks, I'll be featuring 3 women who I met in Patrice Washington's Purpose to Platform community and whose commitment to live and love purposefully inspires me every time I hear them or talk with them. You see, for them, purpose isn't the newest trending topic. It's not the newest trendy pursuit. It's not just a new sexy spin to put on pursuing your dreams, hustling and grinding, or going for your goals. It's a divine calling that wasn't even their idea, but it was God's idea, and it required a serious reckoning on their part, and yes, that was very costly. But they are also proof that your purpose is not delayed, regardless of what's going on in the world or the challenges you are facing right now in your life or in your relationships. And if you first answer the call and stay committed to the call, even when things don't look good and nobody is chanting your name, you can navigate anything that life throws at you. Now, I don't believe in coincidences, so I know it's not a coincidence that my conversation with today's guest coincides with the kickoff of Committed to the Call 5-Day Challenge, a free masterclass run by our mentor and coach, Patrice Washington, to help you break through every barrier to commit to your life's purpose. You see, my guest today ran from her purpose because she didn't think people would want it. Who wants to talk about grief, she said. Well, she's proof positive that God's dream for your life is always bigger than you can ever imagine. And I'm so glad because she is exactly what the world needs and what we need at this time, where there's death, uncertainty, and loss at epidemic proportions. So, without further delay, here's my conversation with none other than Herdyne Mercier. Hello, everybody. This is Suzette Virna, your life coach and your relationship solutionist, and welcome to another episode of Enough Factor podcast. Today, I have the great pleasure of talking to my friend and my P2P sister, Herdyne Mercier. but you'll be hearing more about her in a few minutes. For my subscribers, followers, I call the other group my stealth crowd. You know who you are. You're the ones that listen to the podcast, but you haven't decided to follow or subscribe yet. I see you. I see you. But you know what? I am so happy that you listen. Out of all the podcasts that you could be listening to right now, you're listening to mine. So that's pretty darn special. And you are the heart of this podcast. And I'm always happy that you seem to love what I'm putting down. So if you're new, this podcast is all about one thing: helping you to define what makes you enough in life and in love. Wait for it, on your own terms. We do it by amplifying 3 critical factors. I call them 3 critical factors of enoughness. That's your voice, your value, and your vision. And that's why I'm so glad that Herdyne is here. Herdyne endeared herself to me, not only because we're part of the same group, P2P, Purpose to Platform, but because I had a front row seat at her determination to be authentic and to do the hard work of change. I've seen her take the lead, become her own advocate, and invite others along her journey, sharing all of it with us. And maybe it's because she has learned to celebrate endings and allow herself to fully grieve them, that she's able to do that. Herdyne is a licensed clinical social worker, a certified grief coach, a retreat facilitator, and a transformational speaker. She is also the host of the Redefining Grief podcast. Herdyne's life calling is to create non-judgmental spaces for broken hearts to heal and purposeful living to be restored. Alongside her husband and best friend, Dr. Jameson Mercier, they own and operate Mercier's Wellness and Consulting. They use their expertise and experience to help individuals, couples, and families deal with the heartbreak of unresolved grief so that they can lead healthy lives and lead them to have healthy coping skills. So join me in welcoming Herdyne Mercier to Enough Factor podcast. Hi, Herdyne.
How are you? I'm so honored that you would have me on your podcast. I'm super excited.
I'm so glad you said yes.
Yes, I just know when we get together, it's just going to be pow-pows, pearls of wisdom everywhere.
Everywhere. And I am so excited. I know with our lives being in continual flux, you know, I told somebody I'm learning how to surf. I don't even know how to swim yet, but I'm having to learn how to surf, ride these waves, because every day there is something new. And so that's why I wanted to have you to be a part of season 3 of this podcast, because I knew that what was needed, you could bring to us what was needed, because I think grieving is becoming something that we haven't really wanted to do, but we're having to grieve so many small endings. So I knew that I wanted to have you to be a part of my podcast. So I thank you so much.
I'm honored. Oftentimes when I think about grief and I think about this natural response to any loss, and I don't think necessarily it's something new. We have just never been taught how to deal with it. And so I think what's happening in this awakening of everyone is grieving on so many different levels, whether they're grieving their jobs, becoming the parent, the teacher, the home, the boss, all the different many things, or there's no normalcy in their lives. I think we're grieving at at a place where someone can say, I see you. I may not understand it, but I see you.
Oh my God. And so before we get real deep, I've introduced with season 3 something a little different that I know you'll enjoy doing with me.
I will.
I call it Truth and Dare.
Truth and Dare. Okay.
Truth and Dare. It's not the traditional truth or dare, so that's the good news. But the bad news is you don't get to decide whether you want truth or dare.
Okay, give it to me.
You got to answer it. You got to answer the whole thing. So here goes. What is the truth or a truth that your relationship with grief required you to see and dared you to take radical action about?
I think that truth is actually my very first anchor. When you think about it, is actually anchoring down in the truth. Because the truth can be very, very scary. And people kind of shun themselves away from the truth. Because once you know the truth, then you have to decide, what am I going to do with it? So sometimes it's easier to be in denial and harder to anchor down in that truth. The truth is a very scary place to be, especially if you don't know how you're going to react or the hard decision that you have to make once you know the truth. But it's also liberating. But we run away from it because we've been in the false space of whatever that thing is for so long that it's become normal. And that's the sad truth.
That's the sad truth. Yeah, one of the things that my husband and I both had to actually admit was that there were aspects of living, being alive, feeling alive, that we were missing because we were so busy in the familiar paths we were taking. And it's interesting because as a high achieving woman, or in my case, a recovering high achieving woman, and I know a lot of the listeners are in that boat as well, we kind of get this adrenaline rush off the busyness, right? But we don't realize how much of our lives we've been missing until we're not busy.
I think the busyness becomes a distraction. The busyness, if I may say, becomes that sin from keeping us from the truth. Now, I ain't say you're going to find it in the Bible. I'm just talking on my own wisdom.
Come on, girl. Bring the truth according to Herdyne.
According to Herdyne. And what I want you to know is that the busyness of life is the distraction. And really, if you sit down, which keeps you from sitting down in silence to actually hear what our Creator wants us to do. I think what people don't understand is that, what does your busyness represent? Does your busyness of going into a job and having that parking space and making that good money become the distraction in your life from keeping you from living out your life's purpose? But behind closed doors, when you get in that office, you hate your job. But there's this persona that you have to uphold for society who really can give a crap about you in some cases. Because I've been to funerals and I've seen when someone dies, it doesn't matter how much crying goes on, there's only one casket and one body that goes in the grave. Everybody goes back home. So the truth of the matter is, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to spend some time recognizing that the busyness is a distraction from keeping me from getting silent and centered?
Because, busyness also, as you were talking, I started thinking about it and I said, you know what? Busyness is a distraction from the part of you that doesn't know that you're enough. Because you're trying so hard to prove. You're trying so hard to prove to that part of you that doesn't notice, kind of, I'm not sure I'm enough. You're trying to prove your case. And the metaphor that comes to my mind is you're trying to prove your case in court, and the jury is out deliberating whether you're enough or not.
Yep.
And so if you can present enough evidence, I did this, I earned this, this happened. And maybe you're going to prove to that part of yourself that doesn't know that you're worthy, that you're worth it, that you aren't enough. So what does unhealthy grieving or avoiding grieving show us about ourselves in that, whether we're healthy or not?
I oftentimes, it's in the patterns. What do you do when you're sad? What have you been taught to do when you want to cry, but you self-medicate? I call it pacifying behaviors. Because oftentimes when a baby is crying and you need to go get that bottle ready for them, what do? You give them a pacifier, right? And so with grief, we have pacifying behaviors that I thought, that's a pacifying behavior that when I am sad, I typically navigate towards food, sweets. Someone else may be sex. Someone else may be working more hours on the job because it's a distraction from me being sad. I think what we really need to realize is that everybody's pacifying behavior is unique to themselves and means different things to different people. But what I want you to do is spend some time in reflecting, what do I do when things are not going right and I'm having an emotional reaction of grief? Now, I got to tell you this part. Oftentimes, people think grief is a foreign emotion. Grief is our natural born right. Grief is our natural born right. When I think about, it's my natural born right to breathe. It's my natural born right to exhale. My lungs to exhale. Grief is your natural born right that cannot be dictated by anyone. And so it is your responsibility to open up your heart and your soul and be okay with grieving. Because it's not a choice. It's your right. And too many of us are making it a choice and we're suffering because we're avoiding. Every time you think it's a choice, you're really avoiding. And it's kidding you in this cycle of maybe the food, maybe the sex, maybe arguing, maybe staying away from people, maybe crying in the shower by yourself, maybe feeling alone, maybe suicidal thoughts. Whatever that is that you're going through because you don't think it's your right to grieve, I'm giving you permission.
That's so liberating, because in this Western culture, when I used to work in corporate, you got maybe 3 days. If somebody died in your family, you would get 3 paid days. And you hope you had vacation and you hope you had sick leave, that you could extend it. But basically, they expected you to handle everything that you needed to handle and be done in 3 days. And that always used to baffle me. And you're right, because some people have come back to work too soon. And it is a right, because grief doesn't ask your permission.
And I'll tell you this, when people go back to work, what CEOs don't realize is that they have, because they came back to work so soon, grievers experience what you call grief fog. It's like you leave the room, you go to the office lounge to go get a snack. You don't even know why you went back to that lounge because you were in a grief fog. So you now go back to your office, you sit down, you don't know why you went. You literally experience these moments of, why did I do that? So it's lost time, lost wages. People are restarting over again because they don't realize that you're going to be unproductive. Because any little thing can be triggering. A smell. If you were grieving the loss of a parent and someone talked about pies and your mom was a baker, you're probably going to spend some time grieving that behind closed doors at work. So guess what happens? There lies another 20 minutes of not being productive on the people job. That's the truth. And you know what? I have to say this, that grief is not just the death of someone. We grieve our finances. We grieve when we move. We grieve empty nester syndrome. We grieve a divorce. We grieve not seeing our loved ones. So for you, remember I said it's your right. Mm-hmm. So you have to define why you're grieving. Because grief is the loss of anything that has broken your heart or anyone. It's that loss.
You know, Herdyne, it was something that you said, I might not get it right, but I don't know if it was a post or I heard you, but you were talking about the stages of grief, and you clarified it for us that it was not meant for after the person has died. Mm-hmm. Can you clarify that about, because I thought that was so profound when you said that.
The Stages of Grief by Dr. Ross.
Right.
She was doing the stages of grief during her research, and she did it for people who just found out a diagnosis that they were dying, terminally ill, they were about to die. So she created these stages that people may go through. And for some reason, the world, some individuals have just taken on that people go through these stages. And so when you're grieving and you go do a Google search, you think, oh my God, but I'm not angry right now. Okay, I went through that stage, but 5 years later, I still feel angry in this season. So I should be past that. Then you start blaming yourself, because what people don't realize is that researchers wasn't for grievers. Those are for ill people who were sick and they were dying.
That was it.
People who were sick and they were dying. And with grief, what I want you to know is I always say grief has flare-ups.
God, it does.
What people don't know is it could be 30 years, 10 years, 15 years later, you may have a flare-up. And that flare-up may be, man, she died or he died 15 years ago. And in this season right now, I really do miss them. I miss the touch of my mother. Or something happening. Our nature is just to do what we know to do. When you pick up the phone and you go to dial that person, not realizing that they're no longer on this earth with us. You may grieve that. So there is in the truth, let's talk about the truth that you told me. There's no time frame with grief. So you mean I could have divorced this man 30 years ago, 50 years ago, and I still can grieve him? Yep. Because now you're older and you realize I had envisioned a life for me to have a spouse when the kids are gone. And so I'm in this house really dealing with it like I've never dealt with before because the kids were a distraction.
I know I had a conversation with a couple of ladies not too long ago. Both of them had gone through breakups. And I remember one of the things that they said, Suzette, it's like we've been apart for 10, 13 years. And now I'm starting to like miss him again. I'm starting to like think, well, maybe I should reach out, or maybe there's still something there, or maybe. And so how do you clarify between the flare-up of grief, right, and not taking yourself back into a situation that really is not good for you? How do you deal with the grief, I guess, so that you won't take yourself in a situation that's not good for you?
That's such a good question. And I think the very first thing that I think about is oftentimes I do with my clients is facts and myths. Easy assignment. Take a sheet of paper, facts and myths. First, acknowledge that emotion, acknowledge that emotion and this. Okay, what does this mean? Yes, I'm feeling this. I see you. But what does this really mean? Am I lonely? And because he was the last person that I was with, then maybe that's why I'm channeling back to that. But once you finish do that facts and myths assignment, it typically will guide you in the right path to go. Because oftentimes why grief sometimes is so heavy is because we're not acknowledging it. And the thing, we didn't have closure. What happens with us when someone dies, we have homegoing services, right? And we cry and we talk, we gather, and we have closure because we were able to say goodbye. And what's happening to a lot of individuals, they're not having closure, but they're medicating, right? Or pacifying with different type of activities until they're forced to be still. I think the hardest part in this season now is that this virus has forced us to sit still and reevaluate life. What really matters? Family, friends, who matter? What we're dealing with as far as the racial tension going on in this world. You're making a list of who people to unfollow because you see how they really think and what they really believe.
That's right.
And so you're having to grieve individuals that you probably were with in work relationships with, or happy hour with once in a blue, but you never knew. Deep down inside, there were a lot of gaslighting behaviors. And simply some of them have no empathy.
So true. So is part of grieving, can grieving and these flare-ups be like hallucinations where they put you in this emotional euphoria, where you start romanticizing certain things because you haven't gotten closure, because you didn't fully grieve, because you didn't make the list of the truth and the myths?
Closure can be simply this. What really broke your heart? the truth about really what broke your heart. Because oftentimes when an individual relationship ends, oh, I don't care, and your family members, girl, there's plenty fish in the sea. But in your heart of heart, you wanted that fish. You didn't want no other fish. But if you spent some time, closure may be, wow, I was holding on to him because he was validating me instead of me validating myself.
That's a pal right there. That's a pearl of wisdom.
And the hard truth is I held on to him because I didn't validate myself. I didn't know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
So I was taking on the narrative that society says that if I become Mrs. Someone, then I'll be something.
Mm-hmm. And you and I both know, Herdyne, if you have not validated yourself, when you become Mrs. Someone, it's going to only magnify that you haven't validated yourself, because healthy relationships require that we show up. Not our representative, not our PR agent. You got to show up fully and completely and own your spot, because if you don't, just by the way men are wired, they don't ask permission. They just come on in the way they are, you know? And so one of the things I had to learn was to put boundaries around the part of me that wanted to accommodate, instead of taking a step back and saying, but wait, I don't want to do that, you know, or wait, no, that doesn't work for me. And I think sometimes that's what I hear so much from people. I tell them, listen, the longer you're in a relationship should not mean the less of you. You know, the less you respect yourself or the less your significant other respects you. It should go in the opposite direction. You should become more valuable. Right?
Oftentimes, I think what people don't realize is that being in a relationship, there is an evolution process. If you are the same person that you were when you walked down the aisle 10, 15, 20 years later, I often said that your spouse has failed you because there's not enough checking. And, you know, when I remember being engaged with my husband and us talking, and I said, you would have failed me as a husband if I'm still the same woman that I was when I walked down the aisle. 17 years of us dating later, I'm not the same woman, but is there still more evolution of Herdyne that needs to happen? Yes. But he is my life partner that is with me on this journey. But guess what? Being my life partner doesn't mean that he does the work. Being my life partner means that I do the work and he's there to support me.
Yeah, one of the biggest things I had to learn, I'm still learning. I'm not going to claim I've mastered it. But I'm still learning, especially because I've had more time to be single-minded than to have the capacity and make the room in my life for someone else. And one of the things that I am learning is, you know, that sure, you say what's on your mind, sure, you show up, but like you said, your job is not to change him, right? Your job is not to change him into the image that you want him to be in. And his job is not to change you, but it is to reveal you. And sometimes that's a tussle because the old you don't want to be revealed. It want to stay just like it is. It doesn't want to change. But I can say, even through the tussle, on this side of the evolution that it required, I like myself more. And that's what I meant by being with someone over time should make your value go up. And I think it should make your value go up to you. Where I respect myself more, I love myself more. I like the person that's being cultivated in the tussle, cultivate it, and how I'm having to go deeper inside of me than maybe I would have ever had to go to had I remained single. So I'm grateful, so grateful for that. So very grateful. Now, I know your mission, one of the things that caught my attention almost immediately was you saying that you make grief sexy. And most people don't see sexy and grief in the same sentence. So talk about that. What's sexy about grief?
Sexy about grief, there's an evolution that happens when you deal with the worst part of you, that sad part of you. When you deal with those things, you begin to pull the layers back. And what happens when you pull the layers back and then anchor down in that truth of who you are, not because it was okay that you went through that experience, but it was that you have learned from that experience and it did not take you under. So your walk starts to change. Your talk starts to change. Who you decide to spend your valuable time with changes. And so that makes you sexy because you truly know who you are.
It's like you've become your own best friend, and it's like you've won cool points with yourself because you went through it, and just by virtue of that, light, sexy,
light
energy.
By virtue of that, you go, I'm anchoring down in who I am. Yes, I've gone through some tough things. Yes, there's some things I wish I never did. But at the end of the day, thank God for grace. Thank God for the experience. And thank God for me embracing the wisdom. Because there's a lesson in every experience. And you can choose to fight the lesson, or you can choose to embrace the lesson. But it's a choice that you will have to make. And what I found to be true is that once I accept the lesson in its entirety, and the good, the bad, and the very, very ugly, then I am able to embrace who I am on a much deeper level. Our walk is always sexy.
Well, all right. Okay, one of the things you keep mentioning is hunkering down. So what is that hunker down process? Because I got a lot of ladies who they've been performing or they've been judged by their performance for so long. They don't know what it means to get silent. They don't know what it means to hunker down. So what is that?
So I've developed these 5 anchors. The very first anchor is the truth anchor. We all know once you tell the truth about it, the truth shall set you free. So freedoms come with telling the truth. But you got to anchor down to tell that truth, because sometimes that truth is so scary, you do feel like running in the opposite direction. Because think about it, some people's purpose, you're like, no, God would not have me sit at that table. Do you know who's at that table? Why would he want me there? So you would probably want to run away from your purpose in life, right? So sitting down with that truth that you are enough and God wants you at that table. So get there and don't run. The second anchor that I teach is heart anchor. It's really examining the heart about the brokenness that is experienced. Oftentimes, if you were a child who was raised very in poor situations and you experienced a lot of financial hardship, you went for the career that was going to create the financial cushion, right? But right now, that might be in jeopardy because of everything that is going on. And so you are running away from that truth of, you may have grown up poor, but that did not define you. But you defined yourself as a little poor girl or boy. And so you have to really examine those things that broke your heart. The third thing that I teach is that connection anchor. Who are you connected to? Because when you start telling the truth and when you start dealing with heartache, not everybody's going to want to hear it. So you have to find community that will see you, hear you, and validate you. There is power in community, but it got to be the right one. Then that faith anchor. And it's just saying trust without reservation. Because oftentimes the very first thing, that intangible thing that we cannot touch, the moment things start going bad in our lives, we begin to question our faith. We begin to question God. We begin to say, but I prayed and you didn't answer me. I go to church every Saturday. I go to church every Sunday. I even attend weekly Bible meetings. How could you have allowed this to happen to me? I've lost both my parents and my grandparents and some siblings. I don't understand. So you have, and my job. My relationship is coming to an end. And so there are some people right now that are not anchoring down in faith because they're questioning it. What I want to tell you, it's okay to question it, but hold down and anchor down in those questions because God has the ability. And then the fifth thing is that restoration anchor. And that restoration anchor is just saying emotional well-being. Emotional well-being. And it's saying God is going to restore you to the peace that he wants for you.
Mm. That's the way you hunker down, listeners. That's the way. Mm-hmm. That's the way you hunker down. You can't run away. And that's, like Herdyne said, we have gotten so busy and we've gotten really good at avoiding ourselves, avoiding ourselves. And so hunkering down. So Herdyne, as we bring this to a close, I want two questions I have remaining. One, how people can get in contact with you. And secondly, what you want the final takeaway to be.
People can get in contact with me at Herdyne Mercier. Herdyne Mercier on all social media platforms. Where I like to play is Instagram. All social media platforms. You also can join the Grief Crusaders community. Grief Crusaders community on Facebook. And I think the last question is what I want you to take from this.
Yes.
You get one chance at this life. Be willing to fail and get back up. Be willing to get it wrong, but you keep getting back up. Because at the end of the day, we all have an expiration date. Some of us know when, some don't. It can be gone in an instant, just like that. And what I know to be true is I've never met an individual who I've attended their funeral and saw them again. You cannot be duplicated. So live your best life. Take it day by day. I think people are asking me, how am I doing? My honest answer right now is I'm taking it day by day. Because this day is promised to me, not tomorrow.
That's it. All right, listeners, regardless to where you are right now and what you're going through in your life, remember this. You are worthy. You are worth it. You are more than enough. Bye. You have just listened to the Enough Factor podcast with your host, Suzette Vernon. To get notified of new episodes or to dig deeper into today's topic, become a subscriber. And while you're at it, tell us how we're doing and what topics you're interested in. We appreciate your feedback and your reviews. Until next time, remember, you are worthy, you are worth it, you are enough.